Given recent events, any new game announced these days, especially ones that look promising, are going to face extra scrutiny, and it seems that now we have enough info to answer a lot of the questions surrounding Gray Zone Warfare, so let's get at it. When Gray Zone Warfare was announced, there were a lot of questions to be asked. The trailer that was initially put out definitely told us how the game was going to portray itself. Milsim, loot gathering, open world, etc. But if you're anything like me, you had that nagging question in the back of your head. Yeah, that's nice and all, but what's the gameplay loop look like? How's it going to play? Well, we finally got a lot of answers to that and other info to finally build a picture of what the devs want this game to look like. Before we get started, you knew what game this video was going to cover and you clicked it. What is it about this game that has your curiosity? What are you hoping it will be? Comment your answer down below. I'm curious to see your answers. Alright, I'm going to break down the feature sets that we know about and pose some questions that are still lingering. Bear in mind, when I say we know, what I mean by that is that it's something that devs have stated outright with little to no ambiguity, or shown in-game, or to be their intention. At the end of the day though, it comes down to whether they can deliver on their vision. The developers, Madfinger Games, have stated that Gray Zone Warfare is to be a premium title, aka a box game that requires purchase before playing, and have stated it will have no microtransactions. Excuse my skepticism, but I will believe it when I see it. So here's what we know about the gameplay loop setup. As a player, you'll be one of 16 players within a PMC faction, of which there are 3 on a given server. Initial information gives me the strong suspicion that the early access plan in spring will have you group in squads of 4. So 4 squads of 4 for each PMC faction, 3 factions per server makes for 48 players on a server. But here's the slight twist. Your camp, your fob, or your safe zone is on the server. You load up, accept missions, call in your ride in the form of a Little Bird helicopter, and then get delivered to the main combat theater, which is where the raid takes place. The server is also persistent with no timers on how long you can be on it. Each faction has a specific location for their fob that alters how they experience missions in the form of proximity. A mission for one faction could be a 10-minute walk in the park, while that same mission might require significantly more travel for another faction. The devs have stated that PvE is to be the main focus of the game. They are meant to be a challenge and not just a stopgap on your way to PvP. They plan on having 1,000 AI enemies on the map, separated into their own factions and difficulty. There are no missions that have you kill other PMCs, so while you can absolutely go out of your way to PvP, it isn't the main focus. Okay, so before we go any further, I have a bunch of questions and observations on what we've gone over so far. For starters, for all intents and purposes, this game is an extract game. It fits all the definitions of one. Extraction, loot, risk, etc. I go into all of that in the video linked above. However, the traditional safe zone, or fob, just happens to be on the raid server as well. You're not at risk while you're in the fob, and neither is any of your gear that you've stored away. So it's not really any different than a hub, or the station from the cycle for that matter, save for one critical detail. Normally, the entire player population of a game is in a safe zone, or menu, while the players active in a raid are the ones in the server. Gray Zone instead has players segmented into servers 48 players at a time, which are further segmented by faction and by whether or not they're in the combat zone. So, since you're squatted up as 4 players, are there any disincentives to killing the other PMCs within your own faction? Could you even tell the difference? One thing I can also possibly see happening is that you could coordinate multiple squads while in the fob to then coordinate as a much larger force in the raid. Before, in order to attempt such a thing in a game like the Cycle for example, you'd have to worry about dropping into a raid and seeing if you happen to be on the same server. With Gray Zone setup, you could coordinate which faction to pick, try to end up in the same server, and really only need to confirm while you're in the fob. In theory, this would be easier to pull off with less risk. I personally think this would be kind of cool, as it would allow larger friend groups to play together, but I can also see how this can be abused. And while I understand the devs wanting to make the E in PvEVP more of a thing, I think there is a possible conflict here. Either A, there truly will be 1,000 AI on the map and it's so huge that it's impractical to go out of your way to hunt players down, or B, the devs are possibly being a little naive here. I can see the intent just fine, but something tells me that won't mean a damn thing once players get their hands on it and they start hearing gunshots nearby. Now, the AI is separated into their own factions and the devs have stated the AI won't be completely static, so I'm guessing patrols will be a thing. So we may very well see AI versus AI events that won't make gunshots an automatic PvP draw. And then the other possibility is that this is just stated in order to appease players that want a more PvE experience. I do not know, but these are questions that are still lingering looking for an answer. With that in mind, let's continue on with the rest of the info, but first, if you're still watching, I would like to encourage you to subscribe. I do pride myself on being able to deliver concise videos that don't waste your time. And with that being said, thanks for your consideration, back to the video. The devs have stated that humans all have the same HP and base time to kill. The difficulty will be based on how effective the AI is at engaging you, and I am making the assumption that there will be gear differences as well. I'm actually really happy to hear this. Nothing gets me to roll my eyes quite like having to mag dump a target or land several headshots in a game that's set in modern times in order to kill something. It just takes you completely out of the experience. And another small note, and this may very well be nothing, the fact that they had to specify humans leads me to believe there may be a possibility for wildlife or something else to engage on the map planned. Given the mysterious nature of the way the lore is being presented, I wouldn't rule out something else, but this is pure speculation on my part, so take it with a grain of salt. At first glance, the survival mechanics are nothing outside the ordinary. Anyone who's played a recent or not so recent survival game should see the familiar bars of hydration, energy, which is likely tied to food and sleep, and encumbrance, which is likely tied to the weight you're carrying. But there are a few extra I'd like to point out. It looks like the remaining bars are blood, radiation, and intoxication. Radiation is likely tied to the lore event at the center of the island, and intoxication could be from wound infection or something else. These two are likely the reason we've seen medication animations in the trailers. And based on what the devs have released on the medical system, it's going to be more like a survival game than it is going to be like a traditional extraction shooter. Losing a vital organ will result in death as expected, and the system is complete with bleeding and broken bones, all of which will require their own type of treatment. But in addition to this, you will start having negative effects when your blood levels drop to certain thresholds. And once your blood gets to 50%, you slip into a coma, at which point a teammate has a window of time where they need to stop the bleeding and perform a blood transfusion. Okay, so a couple of observations and questions here. This game effectively has a form of rezzing. It's obviously not preventing death in the form of an organ failure, like having a chunk of your head missing or presumably a 7.62 sized hole in your heart, but if you're not killed outright, your teammates have the ability to patch you up. Depending on various factors, a squad may benefit from having a dedicated medic to hold all the supplies, an idea that I find rather intriguing. But with all that said, I really hope we have the ability to move bodies in one form or another, especially if you're dealing with a situation where you are trying to render aid to a teammate and need to move them to a safer location for the time being. The missions are doled out by the usual trader setup where I imagine you would purchase items from as well, otherwise why call them traders? We are shown 3, but there appears to be 6 total that need to be unlocked. The devs have stated that missions are going to give minimal instructions. They specifically wanted to be no hand holding, so no locations on the map or waypoints to follow. There will also be no menial tasks like gather X number of springs or boxes or whatever. In addition to this, some missions will have branching paths, so you could do a mission one way in its first part and then have 2 choices to make that will result in a different opportunity afterwards. The devs have also stated their goal is to have 150 missions ready for early access. So here are some thoughts on all of this. With regards to the missions being less than handholding, it will be too easy for a content creator to create shorts detailing locations of missions once they are found. So not having it in the game just really adds an extra step for individuals not interested in wandering the jungle playing Where's Waldo. It will only be a matter of time before this info is public knowledge and readily findable for those who want it. My issue is that in an effort to respect the player's intelligence, they may not be respecting the player's time. My concern is that there won't be a reasonable middle ground, that the details for a mission will be so vague that you're almost forced to do a search online rather than waste a ton of your time. I would prefer in some way of intelligibly narrowing down the search in a way that is both immersive but also doesn't waste people's time. It could be something as simple as our source gave us this and have a drawing of a village or a half-blurred picture of a building, at which point a player could spend some time analyzing the intelligence available to then plan the beginnings of a search. Ideally, the level of difficulty with regards to the guidance has an appropriate scaling difficulty. I can imagine players that have already completed 90 of the 150 missions planned will have less of an issue with less guidance than someone who's just starting out. Who knows, maybe it will be something like that and my concerns are unfounded, but we will have to wait and see. With that being said, 150 missions with none of them being menial and some having branching paths is a rather ambitious goal to set right off the bat. I am looking forward to seeing what it looks like and if the team is capable of pulling it off. Gray Zone Warfare so far looks really promising. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching and good hunting.